You're certainly welcome. Well, now you're going to have some fun because there's only two of us left. So the ranking member, Mrs. Dexter, is recognized for 5 minutes. And
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for coming. It is exciting to have the folks who are doing this innovation here with us, so really great opportunity. Dr. Copan, in your testimony, you emphasized that innovation is the determining factor in whether the United States actually secures its mineral supply chains. You also point out that technological leadership depends on consistent policy signals, not boom and bust cycles. Right now, the federal government is sending very mixed signals. On one hand, we are told that we have an urgent mineral and energy shortage driven by AI and electrification, and on the other hand, major solar, wind, and distributed energy projects are being canceled, denied, or stalled. What does the kind of policy whiplash that we are experiencing right now do to private investment, workforce development, and the long-term competitiveness of U.S. energy and mining technology? Dr. Copan.
Thank you so much for that question. It is a challenging environment for corporate decision-making as we look at the need for companies to drive a return on their investment. And certainly in the academic sector as well, there have been changes that have in some cases made it very difficult for faculty, for students, for recruitment. And so as we are at this particular point, we have an opportunity. We're seeing now investments that are coming through the Department of Energy that are very, very positive, looking at the mine of the future and some of the recent calls for proposals. This is a very encouraging time. Future investments also in quantum and artificial intelligence. As we've been speaking today, these are drivers of innovation that ultimately underpin U.S. competitiveness. But it's a time where we need to maintain that constancy of purpose to which I referred.
That resonates with our investigations in the medical sector as well, so certainly understood. Your testimony also makes clear that technology allows us to recover more minerals with less land disturbance through byproduct recovery, advanced processing, and remining of existing waste streams, and many of you have talked about this. Yet much of the current policy discussion here in the halls of Congress has been treating new mining as the only option to really consider. So my next question is, what do you think we need to do to unlock byproduct recovery at scale, and how does byproduct recovery and mine waste reprocessing compare to greenfield mining in terms of speed and environmental impact?
Thank you so much. And you've heard, I believe, from all the witnesses about the opportunities that these unconventional resources represent for the future of the mining sector. It's important nationally to have a framework to look at the action. Ultimately, we need to be measuring all of our minerals that are present in mined ore. As we've been speaking, a lot of our mining operations are looking for one end product, like looking for copper or looking for platinum and palladium. But so many of these other streams are co-products. It will require a rethinking around the total mining of the future so that we can be as efficient as possible. It's going to be very important for us as a nation to invest in cost-effective recovery technologies. The U.S. Geological Survey is doing work along the lines of waste reprocessing and surveys. The Department of Energy's Mine of the Future initiative, the Critical Materials Innovation Hub. These are all very important underpinnings for the innovations that are going to drive a much more sustainable future and greater resource utilization. And lastly, looking at the future of the policies that address the economic realities of the situation. Incentives, pilot scale investment demonstration projects to provide the highest impact ways of strengthening our domestic supply together with market assurance.
Thank you, and I know my time is coming short, but I thank you for your generosity, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep going then. On that note, or in the light of the need for these investments and these investments that are sustained, as well as truly supporting private sector, these public-private partnerships. My concern oftentimes is that environmental protection is not necessarily front and center in that. And I know certainly in the academic institutions that is likely to be more of a focus. I wonder what you think the balancing act is that we can help with here in Congress to make sure that we are incentivizing environmental protection and innovation, recognizing that private sector, if you're investing, needs to get a return on that investment, but also how do we minimize the long-term impacts, which we know mining has a very tragic legacy of harm to the environment.
Thank you. We are at a time as we're looking at the future of workforce, training our workforce to be cognizant of these issues and designing processes, designing projects that take into account total resource utilization and environmental matters. One of the greatest funders of mining education in this country was the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. They're a big part of the mining system, but yet their funding has gone away. And NIOSH's role was really also to include all those occupational health and safety and water utilization, waste minimization strategies, and human health implications. So I think that as we look to the future, our investment in fundamental science and technology, our focus on the future of engagement between the public and the private sector and communities to have a voice in the future of their projects. We talked briefly about the Stillwater Mine Project and the existence there of the Good Neighbor Agreement that is so important. And clearly we heard tragically about the market manipulation that's influenced the Stillwater operation. So as we consider these holistically for the future, having a strategic focus, looking at the big picture, and as has been mentioned earlier on, to have mining once again embraced by the American people, together with the need for resource recovery as an essential part of our strategy, must be where we go.
No, I thank you for that, and I do see this as a real opportunity for bipartisan collaboration. I trained at the University of Colorado and did my major presentation on occupational lung diseases, and mining, of course, was very relevant in that area. So the impacts on health are things that we don't acknowledge enough, so I really appreciate the call out for NIOSH there. Mr. Chair, I have other questions, but I'd like to defer. You're really okay with me continuing?
I like this.
Okay.
The dialogue is great. They're prepared for my question.
Okay. Great. So I did want to bring up the Good Neighbor Agreements and just how do we make sure that those are incorporated, and I welcome other input on this. If my impression is that they can be a win-win for the community and the private sector, mitigating litigation and other things later on. Dr. Copan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and then if others wanted to share their thoughts, that'd be great.
Thanks so much for that question. And as I indicated in my testimony, that is an important model for the United States to look at how communities and how mining operations coexist positively. It requires, number one, coming together around a shared framework and the recognition that we're in this together. And so having the communities come together with a binding agreement, ultimately a legal framework with the corporate partners, and to see this as a long-term partnership that it's open, it's transparent, it's data-driven, and that communities and companies can work together effectively to accomplish sometimes the resolution of very thorny issues. But for the mining sector to succeed in the United States, once again, and for all these great opportunities that we're talking about today, the opportunity for reprocessing and recycling and co-product development, this concept of total mining, rather than seeing, as was called out earlier, this is not waste rock, this is input to another process. This is something that we can utilize to benefit the economy. But the economic reality there is sometimes these co-products are not valuable enough for industry to go after. And so it's going to be important as part of these good neighbor agreements also to recognize that there's sometimes trade-offs that need to be taken between the public sector's interests and the corporate interests, and to find that common ground once again.
Great. Mr. Lugansky, it sounds like,
If I may add,
please.
in mining, water is probably one of the most important both resources as well as tools for extractions. And I think one of the things that new technologies can allow, and we at SLB brought this, instead of today, average open pit mine has 40 to 60 water wells that you need to monitor, you pump, and you try to not to contaminate them with your explosive material or other things. Today we can do 1 to 2 wells horizontal underneath the entire formation, extract that water, treat it through a centralized water treatment facility, which ensures high quality outcome of that water, and then reuse that water either for industrial application or return that water for other usage. And I think these type of technologies that combine innovation and environmental stewardship is what we are trying to bring to the table.
No, I really appreciate that. I wanted to offer the opportunity if others have thoughts about these good neighbor agreements in particular. Yeah.
I'll just add that we spend a lot of time with large mining companies looking at historic deposits or assets in care and maintenance, and these mines were closed under very different economic conditions. They were mined and explored and characterized using sometimes old methods of understanding the subsurface. I mean, literally continental drift is a recent thing. But we're looking at these old assets, and I think some of the great ways I've seen assets in the U.S. succeed is by saying this is an historic asset, we're going to reopen it, and that's going to finance the cleanup of it. And so, this is something that is top of mind for a lot of the industry.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. We are big supporters of that because what we've seen is that our technology empowers local communities to do a couple of things. One, keep valuable materials locally and not transport hazardous chemicals across communities. And what we've seen is when we've gone to these communities to raise support, every local community wants the community to be safe for their children. Yeah. So they're very supportive, and if we can do it in a safe, sustainable manner, at the same time keep the valuable materials in their community, it's a win-win for everybody. So we're big supporters of that.
I appreciate that, and I also think the private sector drives a lot of the investment, and it would really be helpful for the private sector to also be elevating the need for not just environmentally sustainable, but also health-wise impact sustainable mining practices. And so I look forward to working with my colleagues here because I do think that the unintended impacts on health and the environment have led to distrust in many parts of our country. And I think if we really do see this as the technology and innovation we need to be dominant economically in the future, it feels like the right time to learn from our past mistakes. And so really appreciate all of your input today, and I yield back to the chair. Thank you.